In the shadowy fringes of Jewish mysticism, few figures are simultaneously feared and fascinating as Samael. Often described in Kabbalistic and Zoharic literature as an angel of destruction, an adversarial entity, and the Venom of God, Samael occupies a paradoxical space, both servant of the Most High and yet an opposition of humanity. Identified at times with the Angel of Death, the Accuser, or even the Serpent of Eden, Samael represents the raw, untamed forces of judgment and chaos that exist alongside divine order. Yet it is not Samael alone who haunts the mystical imagination. Surrounding him is a dark and complex gang of the feminine persuasion, his wives, or consorts, a quartet of demonic female figures who have come to personify seduction, transgression, and spiritual danger. These four wives, Lilith, Naamah, Agrat bat Mahlat, and Eisheth Zenunim, are not merely passive demonesses, but are believed within Jewish traditions to be active forces within the cosmic drama of the Kabbalah. Each of them embodies a different aspect of forbidden sexuality and spiritual temptation. Collectively, they function as angels of what some sources have described as sacred prostitution, a provocative term referring not to literal temple prostitution, as seen in Canaanite and Babylonian traditions, but to their metaphysical role as seducers of human souls, drawing energy from lust, sin, and the transgression of spiritual boundaries. In this context, sacred prostitution is less about the physical act and more about the exchange of spiritual vitality, the theft of divine energy through sexual sin, and the corruption of sacred unions like marriage. Today we'll be exploring these four femme fatales in Jewish mystical thought, understanding the symbolic and mythic roles of these brides of Samael, and determining how their functions within ancient traditions and texts have shaped them as beings probably best avoided, regardless of how tempting they might appear to be. Lilith. In Jewish folklore, especially in what's become a contentious little text called the Alphabet of Sirach, written sometime between 700 and 1000 AD, Lilith shows up as something pretty controversial. Adam's first wife, not Eve. According to this story, Lilith wasn't made from Adam's rib like Eve was. She was created at the same time as him, from the same earth. And that, apparently, was a problem. As the legend goes, Lilith refused to be subservient to Adam. She wasn't interested in being beneath him, in any sense of the word. Not only did she refuse to be beneath Adam during sex, refusing to assume the more submissive position, but she refused to be subservient at all. She did not believe Adam, or man in general, to be the authority, especially considering that they were believed to have been created at the same time by the same means, and thus created equally. When a compromise couldn't be met, Lilith was believed to grow wings and flew right out of Eden, preferring exile over submission. It is here where some later writings, like those of Isaac ben Jacob Har-Cohen in the 13th century, claim that Lilith went on to shack up with Samael, establishing herself as his first and perhaps principal wife. It was with Samael that Lilith found herself better suited. Whether Samael was more acquiescing toward her pursuit of equality, or whether Samael was merely a tool to further spite Adam, and therefore God, is unknown to us. But it is believed that with Samael, she gave birth to a whole host of demonic children, and thus adopted the infamous title as the Mother of Demons. In the Kabbalistic work, Treatise on the Left Emanation, Samael and Lilith are believed to be the dark parallel of Adam and Eve, those who come to rule over the Qliphoth. the Zoharic representation of all evil and impure spirits. Indeed, where Adam could be seen as the master of animals, being nominated to name them all, Samael could be seen as the master of spirits, a prince of demons, if you will. In the same vein, where Eve could be seen as the mother of all humans, Lilith would come to be viewed as the mother of all demons. Over time, Lilith's legend kept evolving, especially in Jewish mystical writings like the Zohar. But what's interesting is how little we actually know about Lilith's supposed origins, those that trace back to ancient Mesopotamian mythology. Scholars, including Assyriologist Samuel Noah Kramer, used to point to things like the Sumerian myth Gilgamesh and the Hulupu tree, or the Arslan Tash amulets, as proof that Lilith was borrowed from older Babylonian or Sumerian demon lore, where the demoness appears as a spirit inhabiting a tree planted by the goddess Inanna. A similar account is echoed in the additional 12th tablet of the Epic of Gilgamesh, where according to the Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible, Lilith appears as a water spirit, or even an owl, that roots itself within the trunk of the tree. But modern scholars have since pushed back on such an idea, saying the evidence connecting the Hebrew Lilith to those older sources is actually pretty thin. The idea of Lilith being represented as an owl or something more bird-like isn't entirely arbitrary. In fact, such an idea holds some considerable weight when we consider other mythological texts, and perhaps more impressively, more recent archaeological discoveries. Many of you might be familiar with the Burney relief, a terracotta plaque believed to be from the Old Babylonian period that depicts a winged nude goddess that possesses talons. Egyptologist Henry Frankfurt and biblical scholar Emil Kraling identified this goddess with Lilith, and whilst this idea is now heavily debated, with some associating the figure with the Mesopotamian goddess Inanna, or possibly Ereshkigal, the relief has nonetheless become synonymous with the Mother of Demons. It further adds to the notion that Lilith may have once been imagined as something akin to the Greek siren, a hybrid creature that was part woman and part bird, or at the very least, a woman that had some kind of bird-like features including talons and wings. Furthermore, we also see that the word Lilith, or Lilith, shows up in the Hebrew Bible, but only once, in Isaiah 34:14. Depending on your translation, it might read night creature, screech owl, there's that owl again, or just Lilith. In Isaiah 34, the prophet peers into the smoking ruins of Edom, a cursed and forsaken land, abandoned by God, and crawling with creatures of the night, hyenas and jackals to name a few. You might say it's fitting that it is amongst these ruins that Lilith makes her nest. Her inclusion here may be no accident. Isaiah seeks to build a portrait of horror, a landscape so spiritually bankrupt and so cut off from the divine that only creatures like Lilith feel at home in it. In this prophetic imagination, Lilith isn't some misunderstood figure of feminine independence. She's an omen, a creature whose very presence signals the boundaries between nightmare and reality have collapsed. Such imagery goes hand in hand with the Mesopotamian belief of Lilith. The name Lilith is believed in some circles to be related to the masculine Akkadian word Lilu, as well as its female variant, Lilitu. According to cuneiform texts of Sumer, Assyria, and Babylonia, the Lilu and the Lilitu were believed to be demons that afflicted members of the opposite sex with diseases, or otherwise could be night demons that terrorized men in their sleep. Perhaps even more chilling is that we do have evidence that people of the time were actively taking precautions against the likes of such creatures. Across the ruins of the Sasanian Empire, between the 4th and 6th century AD, archaeologists have since uncovered dozens of strange objects buried beneath the thresholds of ancient homes. These include clay bowls, flipped upside down like traps. Inscribed around the inner rim is a spiral of words, protective spells, binding formulas, and curses, all aimed at Lilith herself. Sometimes she appears alone, other times she's named alongside Bagdana, called King of the Liliths, a dark counterpart ruling over a race of demons. These bowls weren't decorative, they were shields. Families buried them beneath their houses, hoping to catch and imprison whatever prowled in the night. In some interpretations, Lilith could shapeshift. She might steal the face of a man's wife to seduce him, or wear the face of the husband to seduce the wife. Either way, the child born of that union would not belong. He would be a cursed offspring, marked by deceit. But Lilith's fury didn't end there. She was believed to hate legitimate children, the ones born of love and covenant, and she would come for them too. The images scratched into these bowls show her bound in chains, arms and legs pinned, huge staring eyes locked in place, a creature caught but never truly safe to be near. One bowl speaks directly to her, a legal curse, a kind of supernatural divorce. Thou Liliths, male Lily and female Lilith, hag and ghoul, I adjure you, here is your divorce, your writ, your letter of separation, sent through holy angels. Amen. Indeed, it would appear that despite being the principal wife and consort of Samael, even he was not enough to satiate her sexual appetite. Keep watching to see why that was. The idea that Lilith was a kind of night demon, especially one who preyed on newborns, or seduced men in their sleep, really took hold in later Jewish thoughts. In total, Lilith is mentioned 5 times in the Babylonian Talmud. In Nidar 24b, Lilith is described as a winged creature. If a woman miscarried something that looked like Lilith, it was still considered a child for ritual purposes, just a very strange one with wings. In Eruvin 100b, an ancient teaching compares some inflammatory characteristics of womanhood to Lilith. She grows hair like Lilith, squats to urinate like an animal, and serves as a cushion for her husband. In Gittin 69b, Lilith appears in a folk remedy. If someone felt a mysterious stabbing pain, they were told to find an arrow of Lilith, flip it upside down, pour water over it, and then drink the water. In Bava Batra 73a through b, there's a wild story about a man named Hormin, the son of Lilith. He could run along the tops of walls faster than horses on the street below. He could even balance cups of wine while leaping between bridges, without spilling a drop. But in the end, the king had him killed. And finally, in Shabbat 151b, Rabbi Hanina warns people not to sleep alone, because Lilith might seize them. Amongst these traditions, there's also a connection between Lilith and an old belief about demons being born from wasted seed. In Eruvin 18b, there's a story about Adam, where after being exiled from Eden, he separated from Eve and spent 130 years fasting in isolation. During this time, it was said that he fathered many spirits and demons, possibly including Lilith-like beings through nocturnal emissions. In later Jewish writings, called the Midrash Rabbah, Lilith appears twice. The first is in the Genesis Rabbah. Here, some rabbis taught that God created a first Eve before the Eve we know from the Bible. This early woman was said to have returned to dust, and later traditions connected her to Lilith. However, the original text doesn't mention Lilith by name, only calling her the first Eve. The idea that this first Eve was Lilith came much later in Jewish folklore. The second reference is much clearer. In Numbers Rabbah 1625, Lilith is mentioned directly in a dramatic moment. After the Israelites rebel in the wilderness, God threatens to destroy them. Moses argues that destroying Israel would make God seem cruel to the nations, like Lilith, who devours her own offspring. The earliest surviving story that straight up names Lilith as Adam's first wife doesn't come from Genesis though, It comes from the aforementioned mysterious text called the Alphabet of Ben Sira, written sometime between the 8th and 10th centuries AD. According to the alphabet, Lilith wasn't made from Adam's rib like Eve. She was made from the same dust and clay as Adam himself. And from the very beginning, there was tension. Lilith refused to lie beneath Adam during sex, claiming they were equals. Adam insisted he was superior. Neither would back down. This leads Lilith to speak the ineffable name of God, a move that gave her supernatural power, enabling her to grow wings and fly away from Eden, leaving Adam alone. Adam cried out to God and, in response, sent 3 angels, Sonoi, Sanzanoi and Samangeloth, to bring Lilith back. But she refused. Instead, she made a chilling bargain. Lilith claimed dominion over newborn babies, 8 days for boys, 20 days for girls, unless she saw the names of those 3 angels. Seeing their names written on an amulet would force her to back off, bound by an oath she had made. This is why in ancient Jewish traditions, amulets were placed around infants, to protect them from Lilith and those of her kind. But Lilith's bargain would come at a cost. As punishment for her rebellion, 100 of her demon children would die every single day. By the early Middle Ages, Jewish folklore had already transformed Lilith into something far more terrifying, a powerful female demon, sometimes said to be not the queen of Samael, but the queen of Asmodeus, the king of demons. According to the treatise on the left emanation, this is actually a daughter of Lilith who shared her name, sometimes dubbed as Lilith the Younger. Asmodeus was already infamous in Jewish tradition, but pairing him with Lilith would speak volumes. Together they became this hellish power couple, spawning endless demonic offspring in a shadowy realm, sometimes called the Yen Welt, the otherworld in old Yiddish tales. This was a place that was believed to exist alongside our own, hidden but ever present. We briefly mentioned the treatise on the left emanation earlier, and it's here that we get the bulk of information pertaining to Lilith and Samael's relationship. According to the treatise, Lilith and the archangel Samael weren't just partners, they were one, a single androgynous double-faced being. They mirrored Adam and Eve, who were also said to have once existed as a single united creature before being split apart. In this mystical view, Lilith and Samael weren't just demons, they were the dark reflection of humanity itself. 2 twin couples, one holy, one unholy, both made in the image of what is above. As mentioned, some traditions emphasize that after having left the Garden of Eden, Lilith flocked to the arms of Samael, where the two eloped and embarked on a joint venture full of sin and debauchery. Yet the treatise tells us of a Kabbalistic tradition that saw a being known as the blind dragon Teninevah arrange this marriage between the two. Teninevah, a strange otherworldly creature who acted like kind of a matchmaker between Lilith and Samael, is described as eyeless, formless and terrifying, perhaps a literary device used to show that only something unnaturally horrific could bring these two menacing entities together. In this narrative, Samael was known as the slant serpent, and Lilith the torturous serpent, an unholy pairing of chaos and desire. But this dark marriage wasn't destined to last. Jewish mystics believe that God himself intervened, castrating Samael to prevent Lilith from flooding the world with their demonic children. Some even saw this as a spiritual echo of an older legend, where God castrated a male Leviathan and killed off a female Leviathan to stop them from creating offspring that might destroy the world itself. Stripped of her partner, Lilith turned her attention elsewhere, targeting men through their dreams, through lust, and especially through nocturnal emissions. In later Kabbalistic writings, it's also said that God had even cooled her power, rendering her infertile, forever trapped in the role of seductress, but no longer able to create new life. Lilith, once a mother of demons, was now reduced to a lonely predator, haunting the edges of sleep, desire, and nightmare. Over time, Lilith's legend settled into two main roles. In some stories, she's the ultimate seductress, the embodiment of lust, tempting men and leading them astray. But in others, she's far more terrifying, a child-stealing witch who preys on newborn babies, strangling them in the night. Interestingly, these two sides of Lilith rarely appear together in the same story. She was either the temptress or the child killer, but rarely both. Still, both versions capture the same fear: Lilith as the dark face of forbidden power, lurking at the edges of the world, feared by men and mothers alike. Naamah. According to the Encyclopedia of Angels by Rosemary Ellen Guiley, various Kabbalistic treatises, including the works of 13th century Rabbi Baya ben Asher, suggest that Samael's appetite for demonic wives exceeded whatever it was Lilith could offer him. Indeed, whilst it's unknown if these additional marriages transpired before or after his castration in various Jewish traditions, it does go to show that Samael indulged in bigamy, perhaps as a means to further distance himself from God by promoting a life of excess and sexual sin. In any case, the second wife of Samael, who rears her head around, is Naamah, a character some might recognize from the genealogy of Lamech, found in the biblical account. Indeed, in Genesis, Naamah is merely a footnote, a daughter mentioned offhandedly as a means to perhaps inflate Lamech's descendants. Yet in the Zohar, she is described as demonic, as a seducer, as in fact a mother of demons in her own right, akin to the likes of Lilith. Other traditions attempt to conflate the biblical Naamah with this more demonic counterpart, suggesting that where her brothers were blessed with talents of agriculture, music and smithwork, she was blessed with the talent of seduction, being so beautiful that not even angels could resist her. It's unfortunate then that, unlike Lilith, there doesn't appear to be many other texts that delve deeper into her relationship with Samael. There don't exist any narratives that detail their union, nor do any commentaries nor treatises that I could find dare tell us any more about yet another unholy marriage. With that, we are left to speculate on whether Samael corrupted the more human, seemingly innocent version of Naamah in the Bible, or whether this Naamah was inherently evil and transitioned into something more demonic on her own accord, making her more attractive to Samael as a result of her wickedness. In the modern translation of the Zohar, from Zohar.com, we are told of a narrative where Adam and Eve actually separated after the death of Abel, and that during this separation, Adam found comfort amongst demons. Adam had daughters with these wicked spirits, and these daughters were believed to be so beautiful that even the angels above took notice of them. Now, it might be tempting to conflate this with the Book of Enoch, where the angels, known as Watchers, become infatuated with the women on earth. But the account in the Zohar doesn't lead us there, but instead tells us that generations passed with these beautiful half-human, half-demon women living amongst the other descendants of Adam. Whilst not specified in the text, there is an implication here that at least Naamah's mother Zillah may have been one of these demon women, because we are told there was one male who was born to the spirit from the aspect of Cain, and he was named Tubal-Cain. A female was born with him. People were going astray after her, and she was called Naamah. Indeed, Tubal-Cain and his sister Naamah are shown here to be born to one of these spirits, along with the aspect of Cain, suggesting that they were both inherently wicked. Yet the more incriminating part of this passage is that Naamah was essentially the belle of the ball, and probably knew it too. The text goes on to suggest that Naamah became something of a man-eater, one who seduced and corrupted men, allowing her to give birth to more and more evil beings. The text tells us, from her came other spirits and demons. They were hovering in the air, revealing matters to the others who were below in the world. Here we see that this promiscuity led to Naamah delivering many other spirits and demons, who not only existed in this condemned state, but also corrupted others with forbidden knowledge and perhaps even dark blasphemous magic. In this sense, you might liken Naamah to that of Lilith. She becomes a mother of demons in her own right, who takes on this role of seductress and works in opposition to her progenitors, Adam and Eve, populating the earth not with humans, but with wicked spirits. Now the text here isn't clear exactly how this is done, but there is some indication later in the text that Naamah isn't conceiving physical human babies, but rather operates in a similar fashion to the succubus, preying on men in their sleep by infiltrating their dreams and using their lust to somehow manifest such spirits into existence. We are told that she is a restless and disruptive being, that she is still alive and dwelling in the depths of the sea. She is said to emerge from the water and interacts with humans, particularly influencing men through their dreams and desires. She seduces them in their sleep, feeding off their lust, but unlike the succubus, she does not steal the seed of the man. However, from this act, she still becomes pregnant and is able to give birth to various types of demons in the world. These demon children, born from Naamah's encounters with human men, are then said to appear in dreams to women, who then miraculously conceive and give birth to spirit beings, seemingly unbeknownst to anyone, including the carrier herself. These offspring are then raised by the primordial demoness Lilith. Naamah, though, also seeks out human children, particularly boys, to attach herself to, so as to bring about their death. However, when she tries to take these children, 3 holy spirits are said to intervene. The text doesn't give us any details as to who these 3 benign spirits are, but nonetheless, they are believed to seize the soul of the child from Naamah and bring it before God, where it is protected and purified in his presence. A subsequent part of the Zohar tells us that sometimes Naamah moves through the world seeking warmth from human interaction. A man may unknowingly fall under her influence, experiencing intense desire for her in his dreams. When he wakes, he turns to his wife and sleeps with her, but his thoughts are still consumed by the passion he felt for Naamah. Because of this lingering desire, the child conceived in that moment is considered to be spiritually connected to Naamah. When Lilith, the ancient demoness, sees the child, she recognizes its connection to Naamah. Understanding that the child was conceived under Naamah's influence, she takes the child under her care, raising it like the other offspring of Naamah. However, unlike human children whom she seeks to harm, Lilith does not kill this child, as it already belongs to her demonic lineage. Instead, she remains with the child for a long time, watching over it as one of her own. Such an account can also be found in chapter 32 of the Sefer HaZohar, otherwise known as the Book of Light, and translated by Nero Dermanar. Here we find a dialogue between several rabbis, with Rabbi Haya starting, "And the sister of Tubal Cain was Naamah, gentleness, and wherefore was this name given her? Was it to indicate that she possessed the power of seducing both human and angelic beings?" Despite the noun gentleness, Rabbi Haya is quick to associate Naamah as a seducer, perhaps implying that this gentleness was more akin to the loveliness that we discussed previously. Indeed, they might sound like good qualities to possess, but it was these qualities that enabled Naamah, according to these Jewish legends, to become not only a temptress of man, but of the angels too. Indeed, by this account, her beauty transcended even the spiritual plane, to the point that not even the divine beings were safe from her glamour and allure. Rabbi Isaac weighs in on this question, reminding us that she overcame Azza and Azael, who in scripture are called sons of God. Indeed, the rabbi here is referring to verse 4 in chapter 6 of Genesis, where we are told, the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. However, the rabbi goes a step further and tells us the names of these two angels, Azza and Azael, perhaps two of the principal angels who were consumed with lust for Naamah, and so fell from heaven as a result of giving in to her. This prompts Rabbi Simeon to add, she was the procreatrix of all the demons of Canaanite origin, and it is she that, along with Lilith, afflicts infant children with epileptic diseases. The effort to illustrate Naamah as evil is truly finalized here, where the rabbi condemns her as an amalgamation of all things wicked, the very procreatrix of all the demons. It's quite something that despite only having a single sentence that barely introduces her in the Bible, Naamah is demonized into oblivion by the authors of the Zohar, who didn't trust her, didn't like her, and attributed to her many wicked things. She was the seducer of men, the corrupter of angels, and in a matter of lines she becomes the scourge of children, afflicting them with epilepsy. Rabbi Simeon continues, perhaps quite chillingly, that Naamah still remains amongst us in present times, and continues her operations to excite lust in men and inspire their carnal desires. He adds that it is only in time, when the Lord decides to cast them out and drives all evil from the world, that such spirits as Naamah and Lilith will cease to exist. Until then, the rabbi advises that men would do well to resist temptation, and not be fooled by their dreams or lustful thoughts, for such deception is likely the doing of Naamah, who wishes to cause ruin and corruption. According to the Tree of Myths, a collection of Jewish tales by folklorist Howard Swartz, we are told of yet another version of Naamah that shows that same dark and evil side of the character that readers of the Bible alone would not have thought possible. The text tells us that in the time before the flood, when God began to regret having created humans, two angels by the name Shemhazai, possibly a variation of Semyaza from the Book of Enoch, and Azazel, another principal angel in the Book of Enoch, who has all sin ascribed to him, begin to converse with God, telling him that they had always opposed the creation of humans from the very beginning. To this, God replies to the angels that those who dwell on the earth are subject to the evil inclination, and that if they themselves went down there, they too would be overpowered by it, and probably give in to it too. Both angels disagree and seek to prove to God that they could indeed spend time on earth and could return having not transgressed and having resisted this evil inclination. So God sends these angels down to watch on earth, hence where they might have got their name in the Enochian story as Watchers. It isn't long, however, before Shemhazai and Azazel become aware of the mortal women, and how beautiful they were, and it wasn't much longer after that before they had forgotten all about their little wager with God, and willingly took lovers from among them. So too did they teach them the secrets of how to entice other men, as well as the dark arts of sorcery and incantations. The two angels then decided to select wives for themselves amongst the daughters of men, with Shemhazai choosing Istahar and Azazel choosing Naamah, whom the text tells us was the most beautiful woman on earth. Interestingly, we see that whilst Naamah is willing to copulate with Azazel, Istahar rejects Shemhazai and actually tricks him into revealing the ineffable holy name of God. When Istahar hears the name from Shemhazai's lips, she's automatically taken up by God and praised for her resilience, before being immortalized amongst the stars, one of the brightest stars in the sky. When Shemhazai saw this, he immediately realized that he had been corrupted, and so he repented, hanging himself upside down between heaven and earth. Azazel, though, refused to repent, perhaps so consumed and infatuated with Naamah to even realize that he had failed his original mission. To this, God bound him in chains and hung him upside down in a canyon, where he is said to remain to this day. This, the text tells us, is why a scapegoat is sent to Azazel on Yom Kippur, bearing the sins of Israel. In another account told to us in this text, both Shamhazai and Azazel come down to earth with all intended innocence, but that they are afterwards corrupted by both Naamah and Lilith, who would later give birth to the Nephilim. The text reads, "They bore 6 children at each birth, and in that very hour their offspring stood up, spoke the holy language, and danced before them like sheep. There were said to be 60 in all. These giants had such great appetites that God rained manna on them in many different flavours, so that they might not eat flesh. But the Nephilim rejected the manna, slaughtered animals, and even dined on human flesh." The heroine of this Jewish legend is naturally Istahar, the only woman who stood firm against the angels and refused to be married unto them. It should be noted that this Istahar is very similar to the Mesopotamian goddess Ishtar, who, funnily enough, was equated with the planet Venus, which may have once been mistaken for a bright star when seen in the night sky. As for Naamah, well, we see her willingly copulate with Azazel, and whilst Azazel is punished, Naamah seemingly gets off scot-free. If we were to consult the additional legends from the Zohar, one may come to the conclusion that Naamah then subsequently leaned into this evil inclination and continued her seduction of men and or other angels, that which, according to Rabbi Simeon in the Zohar, persists even today. Agrat bat Mahlat. The third wife of Samael, as told to us in various traditions, including one found in the online Jewish encyclopedia, is a woman known as Agrat, or Igarat bat Mahlat. The text tells us, whether identical with Lilith or not, a familiar personage as queen of the demons is Igrat bat Mahlat, with her chariot and her train of 18 myriads of demons. Indeed, from such a passage, we can gather that Samael most certainly had a type. Evidently, he seemed to have a preference for the type of woman who took matters into her own hands, who wasn't subservient to her husband, nor obedient to the greater rule of man, but rather one who rejected the status quo. The passage here is quick to liken her to Lilith, much as Naamah is likened to Lilith in the Zohar, women who all shared similar characteristics. From this passage, we can gain almost all we need to know about Agrat bat Mahlat's character. She was probably outspoken, fiery, decidedly different from the image of God. At first glance, Agrat bat Mahlat seems like a full name, which is a strange thing to have when most characters in the Bible are simply mononymous. However, if we underpin the etymology, we see that Agrat and Mahlat are independent Hebrew names, whilst the Hebrew bat means daughter of. Therefore, Agrat bat Mahlat translates to Agrat, daughter of Mahlat. Whilst we don't have definitive proof of who Mahlat, this mother of Agrat, actually is, the name Mahlat can be placed and even conflated by Kabbalistic ideas with a Mahalath in the Bible. In Genesis 29, we see that when Esau realizes his father Isaac disapproved of his marriages to Canaanite women, he went ahead and married Mahalath, who was the daughter of Ishmael and thus of Egyptian descent through her mother Castiel. At some point, however, according to a tradition in the Hebrew goddess by historian Raphael Patai, both Castiel and Mahalath were exiled to the desert, where a demon named Igrathiel seduced Mahalath and engendered Agrat, or Igrat. According to some traditions, the reason for Esau acquiring Mahalath as a wife was not to please his father, who had now turned up his nose at Canaanite women, but as a means to be more like Samael. This would have the effect of further demonizing Esau and delineating him as the evil brother, compared to Jacob, the good brother. In rabbinic literature, we are cautioned in a similar vein to those cautioned about Lilith and sleeping alone. The Jewish encyclopedia tells us, especially dangerous are the eves of Wednesday and of the Sabbath. For then, Agrat bat Mahlat, the dancing roof demon, haunts the air with her train of 18 myriads of messengers of destruction, every one of whom has the power of doing harm. Indeed, unlike Lilith or even Naamah, Agrat does not come alone, but rather travels with her entourage of 18 myriads of demons, sometimes translated as 18,000 demons. One notable aspect about Agrat is her focus on destruction. She haunts the air, she manifests in the night with the intention of bringing harm, and she employs more than enough hands to wreak carnage on a large city, perhaps even an entire country. Unlike Lilith and Naamah, there is no indication that Agrat is seeking men to solicit, nor seeking newborn children to corrupt or kill. Instead, Agrat's intention appears to be more calamitous, more in the mind of anarchy and devastation. Of this demon, the texts do advise that on such nights, one should not drink water, except out of white vessels, and only after having recited scriptural verses 7 times. Conversely, another account found in the Hebrew goddess tells us of another legend, where Agrat is depicted as possessing similar virtues as her fellow wives, as she attempts, alongside Lilith, to seduce King Solomon. In this narrative, the two women disguised themselves as prostitutes, but they were ultimately foiled and bound inside a genie-like lamp. There they were moved to a cave on the cliffs of the Dead Sea, and ultimately forgotten about. However, years later, King David discovered this lamp, and unknowingly freed Agrat, leading to the demoness to thank David by seducing him. This legend tells us that she would give birth to a son, the demon known as Asmodeus. While Agrat bat Mahlat is occasionally listed as one of the 4 demonic queens alongside Lilith and Naamah in later Kabbalistic texts, her direct association with Samael, like Naamah's, is notably tenuous compared to Lilith's. Unlike Lilith, whose union with Samael is well attested in both the Zohar and earlier mystical writings, Agrat, rarely if ever, appears explicitly as Samael's consort in the foundational sources. Instead, her legend seems to move independently, a spectral figure of chaos and ruin who haunts the nights on her own terms. In fact, Agrat's notoriety lends her a kind of terrifying autonomy. She does not require Samael to legitimize her power. Her domain consists of not only sites of spiritual vulnerability, but the rooftops of everyday homes, those which she has the audacity to dance on top of. Her presence in mystical literature feels less like that of a subordinate partner, and more like an embodiment of untamed feminine wrath, operating beyond even Samael's shadow. Eisheth Zenunim. Whilst being recognised as the 4th bride, Eisheth Zenunim, whose name translates from Hebrew as Woman of Whoresome, is one of the lesser known figures in Kabbalistic demonology, and the least described and least acknowledged wife of Samael. In Kabbalistic tradition, the universe is understood as structured around the Sephirot, 10 divine emanations or attributes through which God interacts with creation. These Sephirot, from the Tree of Life, represent qualities like wisdom, mercy, and foundation. However, opposing this divine structure is the Qliphoth, or Kelopot, a term meaning husks or shells, symbolizing forces of spiritual impurity, chaos, and distortion. The spiritual waste left behind when divine energy is misused or corrupted. Each Serapha on the Tree of Life has a corresponding shadow counterpart within the Qliphoth, a kind of mirror inversion of holy power turned toward destruction or temptation. Eisheth Zenunim is described in later Kabbalistic writings as one of the demonic queens ruling within this realm of the Qliphoth. Specifically, she is associated with Gamaliel, the demonic order that corresponds to Yesod, the Serapha of Foundation. In the Holy Tree of Life, Yesod governs sexuality, connection, and the flow of spiritual energy into the material world. But within the Qliphoth, its corrupted reflection, Gamaliel, twists this principle into lust, illusion, and uncontrolled desire. As ruler of Gamaliel, Eisheth Zenunim becomes a symbolic embodiment of sexual sin, seduction, and spiritual decay. Not merely a demon of promiscuity, but the very personification of corrupted intimacy. This association positions her right at home with the other wives, at least with Lilith and Naamah, as a personification of sin and promiscuity. The Jewish encyclopedia makes a minimal reference to her in a long list of demons and their powers, telling us that she is the spirit of sexual desire. Beyond this, however, the character and entity of Eisheth Zenunim remains shrouded in obscurity. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, don't forget to leave this video a like and don't forget to subscribe for more content just like this. Until next time.